You are now tuned into the truth frequency.
We are TFR.
Truth Frequency Radio.
Sit watching our TVs while some local newscaster tells us that today we had 15 homicides and 63 violent crimes, as if that's the way it's supposed to be. We know things are bad, worse than bad. They're crazy. It's like everything everywhere is going crazy, so we don't go out anymore. We sit in the house, and slowly the world we're living in is getting smaller, and all we say is, please, at least leave us alone in our living rooms. Let me have my toaster and my TV and my steel-belted radios, and I won't say anything. Just leave us alone. Well, I'm not going to leave you alone.
In every revolution, there's one man with a vision.
Captain Kirk, I shall consider it.
I've been a participant in some of the most insidious lies and witnessed to deeds that no crazed man can imagine. I spent years watching you from my lofty position to know that you were the one I could trust.
And why did you lie to me?
There still exist some secrets which should remain secret. Truths that people are just not ready to know.
Who are you to decide that?
The world's reaction to such knowledge would be far too dangerous.
Dangerous? You mean in the sense of outrage? Like the reaction to the Kennedy assassination, or MIAs, or radiation experiments on terminal patients. Watergate, Iran-Contra, Roswell, the Tuskegee experiments. Where will it end?
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth! You can't handle the truth! Get out!
Or what? You'll kill me?
Always remember, dissension's the greatest form of patriotism.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies.
We have before us the opportunity to forge a new world order.
Yes, we can. As you say.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories.
A lie is most convincingly hidden between two truths.
Well, I guess it won't end.
No! I don't have time for this. This is about saving the future of humanity.
We know things are bad, worse than bad. We know the air is unfit to breathe and our food is unfit to eat. I don't want you to protest. I don't want you to write to your congressman because I wouldn't know what to tell you to write. I don't know what to do about the depression and the inflation and the crime in the street. All I know is that first, you've got to get mad.
The line must be drawn here. This far, no farther.
I want you to get up right now. Go to your windows, open them, and stick your head out and yell, I'm a human being. My life has value, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
You shall not pass!
You're listening to the Revolutionary Radio Project with your host, Rob Skiba.
Hello and welcome to the Revolutionary Radio Project. I am your host, Rob Skiba. And tonight I'm going to continue my series on the Flat Earth controversy. And, whenever I play that intro, I'm going to deal with the potential, at least, of a conspiracy. Are we dealing with a conspiracy here? Now, there's some people that say that the fact that people are even discussing this right now is part of a conspiracy that was generated to get us all to look stupid and make the Bible look bad and Christians look bad, and it's against us for that reason. What if, though, that the conspiracy is the other way around? Now, let's just think about that for a minute, because a lot of people have been asking me, well, okay, if this flat earth thing is true, if we are in a flat enclosed system exactly as the Bible describes, then what's the motive? Why would they lie to us? Well, I mean, the motive seems pretty easy to me. Quite clear, actually. First, you get people to doubt the Word of God by destroying the very foundation of our Bible, Genesis, specifically the creation account. Second, set up a new paradigm where God is out and science is in. Evolution thus removes God from the equation. Then when evolution finally runs its course and becomes utterly bankrupt, introduce the idea of intelligent design. But deny the true designer his due credit and place it rather on ancient aliens. Then promote the ancient alien theme as much as possible in all forms of media by perpetrating the concept of Earth as a tiny blue marble, orbiting an average sun in an average galaxy among trillions of other galaxies in an ever-expanding universe. Interesting that a new blue marble just came out this week. With so much potential for life to exist in such a vast expanse, the idea of alien scientists being our creators seems a lot more plausible over time and heavy indoctrination. The stage is finally set for our ancient alien creators to return and bestow upon us their miracles, signs, and wonders in order to convince us all the more that all religions are false. We then put our trust in them. And finally, when Christ does return, we are all convinced that he is the enemy and our united world gathers together to make war with him. Is that what's happening? I don't know. I'm just considering the possibilities here. But with that in mind, consider what the scientists of our day have to say about God and our Bible.
What would you say to some of the parents who are like, look, you know, we're going to go ahead, we'll learn about evolution, but we also believe in creationism. What is the harm in learning the Bible's creation story?
Well, learning the story is fine. I mean, that's great, but it's not science. And tax dollars used for science education shouldn't be used to teach creationism as an alternative. Creationism is not right.
The notion of creationism, or in fact, look, Senator Marco Rubio, who's presumably a reasonably intelligent man, was asked, what's the age of the earth? And ultimately, either because he actually believed it or he was trying to appeal to some constituency, had to argue that it's a big mystery, that somehow we should teach kids both ideas that the earth is 6,000 years old and that it's 4.55 billion years old, which is what it is. If you think about that, somehow saying that, well, anything goes, we shouldn't offend religious beliefs by requiring kids to understand reality. That's child abuse.
It sounds very laudable to teach the controversy, to teach both theories, but there aren't two theories. There's only one theory around. There's only one game in town as far as serious science is concerned. Of course, you get negative reactions from creationists, but who cares about creationists? They don't know anything.
He's like primary atheist of the world. And so if you're going to talk about science and religion, you need people like that to find out where are they thinking, where are they taking us, what's it all about. But we couldn't just feature Richard Dawkins. We need some other views here. And so we combed the landscape. And we found a Jesuit priest. This is the academic order of the Catholic Church. And we have with us Father Martin. Welcome to Star Talk.
Thank you very much.
All right. You, as a modern Catholic, have no problem with evolution.
Correct.
Correct. I can't say the same about other theologians who walk this earth. So what does that mean?
It means that
in the world, in politics, in all of this.
Sure. Well, it means that different Christians have different viewpoints on that. I'm a firm believer in evolution. There are some people who don't believe it. I'm not sure how you can't be convinced if you see the kind of archaeology and the sort of the kind of history of the world. But there they are. So I can't account for ignorance.
Okay, so not to put words in your mouth,
Sure.
But what you might be saying here in this conversation is that for religion to go forward and not be in conflict with science, it needs to embrace what science finds about the natural world and not jump in the face of the scientists and say, that conflicts with my interpretation of Scripture, therefore you must be wrong.
No, I agree. And I think most religious scientists, I'm not a religious scientist, would say that and would say, this
Yes,
is
they
helping,
would, by the way.
Yeah,
Yes.
This is helping me
The ones I know.
understand. Yeah, this is helping me understand God's beautiful world. And I think what happens sometimes is, religion gets caricatured. So obviously, if you're religious, you must not believe in evolution, which I think is it's
Most
false.
Well, it's certainly true for some. You're saying it's not true for all.
I'd say for a few.
When we come back, we're going to find out if you have to give up your religion to believe in evolution. Clearly, the good father here doesn't. But how about others? When Star Talk continues. So, one of the great questions out there is, how do we get more religions or more people who are religious on board with the moving frontier of science? Recognizing that you don't have to give up your religion unless perhaps your religion requires that there was no evolution. If it requires it, maybe you got to sort of lose it. But
that's probably pretty few religions, right?
I would think so.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, right? I mean,
well, I hope so. I frankly, I have a confession to make, priest.
This is your second confession. I'm listening.
I don't understand people who can't believe in evolution. I don't understand people who don't look at, the sort of carbon dating and things like that in fossils. I can't understand it. And I have a hard time understanding why people cannot accept the fact that God can work through evolution, that it's just as much of a miracle of creation if it takes 10 million years or 15 million years as if it took 7 days. So I don't understand that. Or we shouldn't say religious people think this or religious people think that, because it is a label that is applied to people and often applied to make them seem uneducated, insane, or just idiots. And as if you have to check your brain at the door.
If you add up all the begats in the book of Genesis, for example, you get an age for the earth. 6,000 years old, plus or minus a little. The universe is said to be exactly as old as the Earth. This is still the standard of Jewish, Christian, and Muslim fundamentalists, and is clearly reflected in the Jewish calendar. But so young a universe raises an awkward question. How is it that there are astronomical objects more than 6,000 light years away? It takes light a year to travel a light year, 10,000 years to travel 10,000 light years, and so on. When we look at the center of the Milky Way galaxy, the light we see left its source some 30,000 years ago. The nearest spiral galaxy like our own, M31 in the constellation Andromeda, is 2 million light years away. So we're seeing it as it was when the light from it set out on its long journey to Earth 2 million years ago. And when we observe distant quasars 5 billion light years away, we're seeing them as they were 5 billion years ago before the Earth was formed. They are almost certainly very different today. So if, despite this, we were to accept the literal truth of such religious books, how could we reconcile the data? The only plausible conclusion, I think, is that God recently made all the photons of light arriving on the Earth in such a coherent format as to mislead generations of astronomers into the misapprehension that there are such things as galaxies and quasars, and intentionally driving them to the spurious conclusion that the universe is vast and old. This is such a malevolent theology, I still have difficulty believing that anyone, no matter how devoted to the divine inspiration of any religious book, could seriously entertain it. Consider again that pale blue dot we've been talking about. Imagine that you take a good long look at it. Imagine you're staring at the dot for any length of time, and then try to convince yourself that God created the whole universe for one of the 10 million or so species of life that inhabit that speck of dust. Now take it a step further. Imagine that everything was made just for a single shade of that species, or gender, or ethnic or religious subdivision. We can recognize here a shortcoming, in some circumstances serious, in our ability to understand the world. Characteristically, we seem compelled to project our own nature onto nature. Man, in his arrogance, thinks himself a great work, worthy of the interposition of a deity. Darwin wrote telegraphically in his notebook, more humble, and I think truer, to consider him created from animals. Close quote. We're Johnny-come-latelys. We live in the cosmic boondocks. We emerged from microbes and muck. Apes are our cousins. Our thoughts and feelings are not fully under our own control. And on top of all this, we're making a mess of our planet and becoming a danger to ourselves.
I want to make an important point. This is not all people in the world, this is Americans, religious people. It depends on which study you get. You ask, do you pray to a personal God? These numbers vary, but they're high and they're up around 90%. Okay? It might be 85. That's actually not important. That difference is not important for the point I'm about to make. It's high, okay? In the West, in America, 90%. Okay? What percentage of educated people are religious? The number drops. I'm talking about graduate degrees here. Among all people with masters and PhDs, the religiosity drops. Somewhere around 60%, might be 65. The point is, it drops with education level. Now let's bring in scientists. How about what percentage of scientists in America are religious? You average over all the branches, it's about 40%, maybe 35%. In there's a range, of course. Biologists, physicists, astrophysicists are lower. The sort of engineers and mathematicians are higher. So it averages out to about 40%. So this looks like scientists are 40% down from 90% from the general public. But that's the wrong, no, it's 40% down from 60% because all scientists have graduate degrees. So the graduate degree in any subject gets you halfway there. The science is the increment from the educated degrees. I mean, from the all educated people. That takes it down to 40%. Now you go to the elite scientists. This is a well-known number. 7% are religious, claiming a personal God to whom they pray and intervene in their lives. I submit to you that with the current atheist fervor that has taken on over the past several years, I would say launched, the modern atheists they're called, launched by the Dawkins book and the Hitchens book and the Sam Harris book and the like. And I was just in Borders recently. Couldn't believe it. Sorry I didn't have a camera. Borders books. There it was. A section called Atheism. It was like, I'd never seen that before. It's like, okay. There it was. They had enough critical mass of books to make a section. So, here's my problem. Here's my concern. When you're educated, and you understand how physics works, and you're mathematically literate, and you understand data, and you understand experiment, and you go up to someone who doesn't have that training, and they are religious, and you ask them, why are you religious and believing in invisible things that influence your life? What's wrong with you? Okay? That's unfair. It's not only unfair, it's disrespectful for the following reason. Until that number is 0, you've got nothing to say to the general public. These are scientists among us in the National Academy of Sciences who are religious and pray to a personal God, and I know some of them. And you're fighting the public for the religious beliefs? Figure that one out first, because maybe there's an asymptote. Maybe you can't change everybody. Maybe that's telling us something. Maybe there's something in the brain wiring that positively prevents some people from ever being an atheist. And if that's the case, in a way, they can't help it. And you'll never know it because you're not one of them. So I ask you, first, for compassion with the public, but you should target your exercise and your experiments on understanding that number. Because that's not 0. Yes, it's low, but it's not 1%, it's not 0.5% or 0.1%. It is 7%. 1 out of 14. If this were the National Academy of Sciences with 900, you'd have 100 people in here. Did I do that right? 7%? 65. Carry the 2. What, 65? Sorry, 7 times 9, yeah, so 6, yeah. You have 65 people in here among elite scientists praying to their personal God.
So, now, I don't care. I actually personally don't care what people want to believe. This country was founded on religious freedoms. That's how that happened, okay? And what enabled the religious freedoms is that our Constitution makes no mention of God at all, which means nobody's God reigns supreme over anybody else's. And therein is the religious freedom that attracted all these waves of immigrants for centuries. And so, I don't have an issue with what you do in the church. But I'm going to be up in your face if you're going to knock on my science classroom and tell me that I got to teach what you're teaching in your Sunday school, because that's when we're going to fight. And I'm going to tell you something. There's no tradition of scientists knocking down the Sunday school door, telling the preacher, that might not necessarily be true. That's never happened. There are no scientists picketing out front of churches. There's been this coexistence forever. So to have the religious communities knocking down the science door, there's something wrong there. And I think back to Al-Ghazali and the 12th century and the fall of that intellectual empire. And it's got me scared in America. Do you remember that case in Jersey where this middle school kid, forgive me, I forgot his name, I met him, Matthew LeClaire? Do you remember this? In his history class, the teacher was saying that Jesus is the only one and true Savior, and Christianity is the only one and true religion, and if you were not, you were damned to hell. And he pointed to a Muslim girl and said she's damned to hell already, it's too late for her, and that Noah's Ark carried dinosaurs on it, and that the Big Bang and evolution are not scientific. He recorded this and submitted it to the New York Times. And it became a whole expose on this teacher. And then what happened? The ACLU came out, and separation of church and state, and it's a violation of the separation of church and state. And I said, I don't normally get in those arguments, because I got the universe to worry about. I let that go. But then I thought, no, people are missing something here. It's not a case of a separation of church and state. It's not. It's not. Okay? I looked at the comments and the transcript. I ignored the part about Jesus being your Savior. I ignored the part about Christianity being the one and true religion. I paid attention to the statement that Noah's Ark carried dinosaurs, okay? And so, I wrote a letter to the editor of the New York Times that they printed, and I will read to you. To the editor, people cited violation of the First Amendment when a New Jersey school teacher asserted that evolution and the Big Bang are not scientific and that Noah's Ark carried dinosaurs. The case is not about the need to separate church and state. It's about the need to separate ignorant, scientifically illiterate people from the ranks of teachers. Let's fix this one once and for all, okay? Let's just fix this, okay? Once and for all. Yes, Einstein and God were like that, okay? It's like God doesn't play dice with the universe. It turns out God does. That's what quantum mechanics is all about. He was wrong about that, okay? He mentions God a lot. And so all the religious people like claiming him because he's famous and he's unimpeachably smart. And if you get famous, smart scientists in your camp, that boosts your camp, okay? But let's straighten this out once and for all. Here's a letter from Albert Einstein in his later years, 1954, a couple of years before he died. It was, of course, a lie, what you read about my religious convictions. A lie which is being systematically repeated. I do not believe in a personal God, and I've never denied this, and have expressed it clearly. If something is in me which can be called religious, then it's the unbounded admiration for the structure of the world so far as our science can reveal it. Case closed. So anyone says Einstein was religious, just show him this letter, okay?
This guy, Neil deGrasse Tyson, yes, he is apparently a very smart man, but this guy is unbelievably full of himself. Listen to this.
Characteristic you value most in yourself.
I like, and I've worked hard at this, the ability to just speak something that is so fundamentally true that it's not subject to your opinion about what I just said. That gets
an absolute.
That gets right into the center of any conversation, and then I can walk out and let that be the it's not, well, you think that, but I think something else. Then why even have the conversation? Then there's an old saying, in the universe, they're the laws of physics, and everything else is opinion.
Everything else is just opinion. You can walk in a room and you are the one who has the truth. You are the source for truth. All right, sure, whatever. I mean, listen to this guy. There was another show he did on Star Talk where he was talking about how he has celebrities on, and he gives them the privilege of asking him any question they might have.
Maybe they don't spend much time with scientists, so I try to give them a chance to sort of ask any questions that might be lingering within them, especially of the universe, because there aren't that many astrophysicists in the world.
That you can just
No, just
call.
not that many.
There are about
Oh, is it just me that?
7,000 of us.
Yeah, I was about to say,
it's
and I
about
know
7
two.
Right.
So I'm doing pretty good here.
Yeah, you're doing real good, honey. Yeah, so there's about 7,000 professional astrophysicists and about 7 billion people in the world. So Charles, you do the math, what do you get?
We are 1 in a million, everybody.
Yeah. And you got two right here.
We are 1 in a million, everybody.
I'm feeling so special.
Yeah. So I try to give them that opportunity. So we closed out the interview. I just asked, you got any questions you got for me? Let's see.
You got any questions for me? Because I'm 1 in a million, and I know everything there is to know about the universe. So you can ask me. Yeah, I have a lot of hubris, but I'm humble. Just ask me. And it seems to be a trend with these guys, and Bill Nye is about the same way, especially when it comes to issues of people who believe the Bible.
46% of Americans believe the story of Genesis is true. So I just
It's amazing. It's astonishing.
I know that the world was created in 6 days.
Here again, another quote from your book. Inherent in the rejection of evolution is the idea that your curiosity about the world is misplaced and your common sense is wrong. This attack on reason is an attack on all of us. What do you mean by it's an attack on all of us?
In other words, everything that the rest of us do as taxpayers and voters and citizens of the world, everything that we do to improve the lives of other people or to improve our own quality of life, to build buildings that rely on our understanding of physics, to build sewer systems that rely on our understanding of gravity, that all of this is inconsistent with this other world view that where they take the Bible literally, as written in English, by the way, take that literally and deny everything else that gives us all these wonderful things that our society provides, food, clothing, and shelter. So when you are attacking our science or our ancestors who made these discoveries about nature, you are, for me, attacking all of us who embrace it and use it and want to make the world better.
So are you urging people to give up on the idea of creationism?
Oh, yeah, please.
I get it. You don't want the schools teaching this stuff, or if they do it in religion class, that's one thing, but certainly not in science class. But I guess alongside that, do you also need parents to stop teaching this to their kids as well? Because obviously, if you're from a religious family, presumably you're going to be hearing this at home as well as at school, yes?
I just really want to, in general, it's not religion that's teaching creationism. It's a special subset of a certain religion that's teaching creationism. I just really want to say it's not a broad brush on that. And so, yeah, our problem is when parents are brought up with this extraordinary worldview, they bring their kids up with these extraordinary worldviews, and it's really hard to change when you're a grown-up. I mean, it's harder than quitting smoking or what have you. And so our trouble is, for a society that needs as many scientifically literate people as possible, and I'm not talking about the United States, I'm talking about the world, Canada especially, we need as many people who are literate, who can make good decisions as voters about what's reasonable, what's a good thing to do, what's not a good thing to do, what we need to put our resources into, what we should not put our resources into. We need those people to understand science well enough to make good decisions. And of course, we need engineers and scientists to change the world.
The amazing thing is that every atom in your body came from a star that exploded. And the atoms in your left hand probably came from a different star than your right hand. It really is the most poetic thing I know about physics. You are all stardust. You couldn't be here if stars hadn't exploded, because the elements, the carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, iron, all the things that matter for evolution weren't created at the beginning of time. They're created in the nuclear furnaces of stars, and the only way they can get into your body is if the stars were kind enough to explode. So forget Jesus. The stars died so that you could be here today, okay? And anyway.
40%, 45% of the American people believe literally in Adam and Eve, believe literally that the world is only 6,000 years old. I mean, that's a shocking figure, and you can't duck out of it by saying, oh, sophisticated theologians don't believe it. Unfortunately, what sophisticated theologians believe isn't really relevant to what the majority of Christians do believe. When we're talking about moral philosophy, when we're talking about the origin of the cosmos, when we're talking about the origin of life, when we're talking about why we all exist, there is no reason whatever why we should treat the writings of scribes in whatever it was, 800 BC, 600 BC, as being particularly wise. We could listen to Confucius, we could listen to the Buddha, there are all sorts of people we could listen to, and we could listen to modern philosophers as well and modern scientists as well. Once again, I come back to the point, there is nothing special about the Bible.
You don't believe that the Earth is round only if you're an astronaut. You don't believe Napoleon existed only if you're a historian. You believe these things because they're facts proved by evidence. Evolution is also a demonstrated fact. The truth really is out there. It's not a matter of opinion.
Oh, really? You know, I would beg to differ. If you look at the so-called evidence for evolution, it is seriously lacking, and most of it is based on circular reasoning. It's the whole, oh, well, that rock layer right there, that's from the Jurassic period. Well, how do you know? Well, because we found this dinosaur right here, and we know this dinosaur is from the Jurassic period. Well, how do you know that dinosaur is from the Jurassic period? Well, because we found it in that rock layer right there. And this is what passes for science, okay? And it's just like that, exactly like that. And it's pushed on us from a very young age in our secular school systems and movies and television all over the place. This is what passes for science, and it's indoctrination. That's what it is.
And today, 75% of kids from Christian homes that go to public schools are going to reject the Christian faith, mostly because of this great age of the earth issue.
How old is the earth? Evolutionists claim it's 4.6 billion years old. But what does the evidence say? Let's take a look. There are so many evidences of a young earth. The Methuselah tree, the Great Barrier Reef, erosion rates. Continents are eroding at a rate that would level them in just 25 million years. We've got comets in our solar system, but they only last 100,000 years. Why do we still have comets? Sahara Desert is growing, oil is still under pressure, Earth's magnetic field is actually getting weaker, putting a maximum age of 25,000 years on it. Earth's rotation is slowing down, the moon is receding, the human population is at 6.5 billion. Trace that backwards, it all started 4,400 years ago, right when the Bible says the flood occurred. Why? Because the earth is young, not old.
The textbooks in our schools are filled with the idea of millions and billions of years. The next time you hear someone say millions and millions of years ago, stop them and ask, were you there? Science is knowledge derived from observation and study. Can you observe, study, or demonstrate something that happened billions of years ago? Absolutely not. It is true that over half the scientists believe in evolution. That is true, but that does not make evolution true. Just because a bunch of scientists believe something does not make it true. They have a long history of being wrong. They used to teach that a big rock will fall faster than a little rock. They were wrong. They used to teach that if you were sick you had bad blood. This was known as the doctrine of humors. It was believed that if you bled out the bad blood you would get better. There used to be places all over the United States where you could go and get your blood taken out. You knew where they were because out front they had a white pole with a red stripe around it. The barber was the bloodletter. And right beside George Washington, when they were bleeding him to death, was a Bible that told them, for the life of the flesh is in the blood. Now let's say you went scuba diving and found a sunken boat with a treasure chest full of old coins. You look at one of the coins and it has a date of 1600 on it. You reach in and pull out another and it reads 1700. You reach in and pull out a third coin and it has a date of 1800. Now I'm going to ask you a simple question. When did the boat sink? You ought to be able to figure out that the boat sank after 1800. It could not have sank before 1800 because we have a coin in there from 1800. This most recently dated coin becomes the limiting factor on when the boat sank. There are numerous scientific ways to show the universe is not billions of years old. In 2011, the world's population reached 7 billion people. In 1985, there were 5 billion people on planet Earth. And in 1800, there were only 1 billion people on the planet. Most people agree that there were only about 1 billion people around 1800. The world's population at the time of Christ was about 250 million people. Starting from the Bible, we see that 6,000 years ago, God created everything. 4,400 years ago, there was a worldwide flood in which only 8 people survived. And this is exactly what the evidence shows. The current population shows only 4,400 years of growth. God's Word is truth. Let's talk about supernova rings. When a star blows up, it creates a nova or a supernova. Astronomers have observed that about every 30 years a star dies and explodes into a supernova. There are only about 300 supernovas. Let's see, 300 times 30 equals about 9,000 years. Well, if the universe is billions of years old, how come there are less than 300 supernovas? There should be several 100 million of them. This is evidence that shows that the universe is only thousands of years old, not billions. Textbooks say red giant stars evolve into white dwarfs stars over billions of years. They teach that it takes billions of years for a star to evolve from a red giant to a white dwarf. Well, we know this is not true. Egyptian hieroglyphs from 2000 BC describe Sirius as red. It was observed to be red as recently as 150 AD. Today, it is a white star binary. So no, it does not take billions of years for this to happen. It only takes thousands. Jupiter is cooling off, and therefore cannot be billions of years old. If it were billions of years old, it would have cooled off by now. Here we have the moon. The moon goes around the Earth. I think we can all agree about this. As the moon goes around the Earth, it is gradually getting farther away. We are slowly losing the moon. It's leaving us a couple of inches per year. Not a big deal. But if the moon is getting farther and farther away every day, that means that it used to be closer. Well, if we bring the moon in closer, we start to create a problem because the moon is what causes the tides. If the moon were closer, the tides would be higher. There's a law called the inverse square law. If you brought the moon to 1/3 the distance, you flip the 1/3 and square it, you get 9 times the gravitational pull. If you were to do all the math on this, you will find out that the moon and the Earth would have been almost together just over 1 billion years ago. Walt Brown, in his book In the Beginning, says that this fact alone puts the age of the Earth-Moon system at less than 1.2 billion years max. Short period comets are losing material and have a life expectancy of less than 10,000 years. If the universe is billions of years old, why do we still see comets? They should all be gone by now. Magnets lose their strength with time. The Earth's magnetic strength has declined 10% in the last 150 years and 40% in the last 1,000 years. Since it is getting weaker, that means that it used to be stronger, and it cannot be more than 25,000 years old. The Earth's magnetic field alone limits the Earth to being less than 25,000 years old. This also means that carbon dating cannot work for more than a few thousand years. The Sahara Desert has a prevailing wind pattern. The wind almost always blows the same direction. This causes the desert to grow. The process is called desertification. They did an in-depth study of the Sahara Desert and came to the conclusion that the Sahara Desert is probably about 4,000 years old. So the desert started growing about 4,000 years ago. If the Earth is millions of years old, why is there not a bigger desert somewhere? Why would the biggest desert on the planet be less than 4,000 years old? Well, let's start from the Bible and see if we can figure this thing out. The Bible says that 6,000 years ago, God created everything. 4,400 years ago, there was a worldwide flood. It's pretty hard to have a desert under a worldwide flood. So I predict that the oldest desert should be less than 4,400 years old. And it is. Again, God's word is truth. Sometimes when they drill into the ground, they hit oil. And these oil wells can have up to 20,000 pounds per square inch of pressure. That is a lot of pressure. 20,000 psi. The people that have studied this have concluded that the rock can only hold that pressure for about 10,000 years or less. They say it should have cracked the rock and leaked off in less than 10,000 years. So now I have two questions. Where did the oil come from, and why is it still under pressure? Most scientists agree that oil comes from organisms that are changed by heat and pressure, turning them into oil, and it does not take millions of years to make oil. In 1971, they learned how to make oil in 20 minutes in the laboratory. In 1996, a proposal was approved in Western Australia that would build a plant to create oil from sewage sludge in just 30 minutes. There's a place in Texas that has turned turkey guts and other waste into oil. They said, we duplicated what Mother Nature does, but what Mother Nature took millions of years to do, we do in about 30 minutes. The Sinclair Gas and Oil Company uses the dinosaur as their logo. They say dinosaurs turned into oil, mellowed for 80 million years. I don't think so. Again, let's start with the Bible and see what really happened. 6,000 years ago, God created everything. 4,400 years ago, there was a worldwide flood. During that flood, lots of animals and people drowned. They got buried by the gravel, rocks, and mud and sand, which got pretty heavy after a while, and eventually they were squished into oil. So the oil that is down there today is from the people and animals that drowned and got buried in the flood of Noah's day. Wood petrifies quickly. Here's some petrified firewood. Here's a petrified fish giving birth. It does not take millions of years to give birth. Here's a petrified cowboy boot with the cowboy's legs still in it. Here is a picture of the oldest tree on the planet. It is called the bristlecone pine. Now, tree ring dating is not an exact science. Trees often produce more than one ring each year. But this textbook says the oldest tree in the world is 4,300 years old. Now that is a pretty old tree. However, I have a question. If the Earth is billions of years old, why don't we have an older tree someplace? Why is the oldest tree 4,300 years old? Here is a picture of a coral reef. The largest coral reef in the world is off the coast of Australia and is called the Great Barrier Reef. Some of the reef was destroyed during World War II by warships and things like that. Afterwards, some environmentalists studied the reef to see how fast it grows back. They watched it grow for 20 years. After watching it grow for 20 years, they came to the conclusion that the reef is less than 4,200 years old. If the Earth is billions of years old, why don't we have a bigger reef someplace? And why is the oldest coral reef less than 4,200 years old? When it rains, 30% of the water runs into the ocean, bringing with it mineral salts. The oceans are getting saltier every day. Today, they are 3.6% salt. They could have gone from fresh water to 3.6% salt in less than 5,000 years. If the Earth were millions or billions of years old, the oceans would be much more saltier. If you have ever been in a cave, the guide always says, don't touch the formations because they take millions of years to form. They say this formation in New Mexico started 250 million years ago. I don't think so. Some say that the fastest they can grow are 2.5 inches per 1,000 years. Again, I don't think so. Here are some 50-inch stalactites growing under the Lincoln Memorial that was built in 1922. The photo was taken in the 1960s, so this happened in only about 40 years. It didn't take millions of years. Here's a bat covered with flowstone before it could even rot. Here's a picture of a guy in a building in Indiana that has huge cave formations in the basement from where the water had been leaking through the limestone. The picture was taken only 40 years after the building was built. Here's a picture from a mine in Australia. The mine was closed for 55 years, and when they went back in, there were these huge cave formations inside that only took 55 years to form. Again, it did not take millions of years for these things to happen. Did you know that at the current rate of erosion, the continents would erode flat in 14 million years? Obviously, the continents have not eroded flat, so the Earth cannot be millions of years old. Erosion features all over the Earth show there was much greater erosion in the past, probably from Noah's flood. The whole world was destroyed by Noah's flood. Here we have the Grand Canyon. This textbook says over millions of years, the Colorado River has carved out the Grand Canyon from solid rock. This textbook says the Colorado River has cut through layer upon layer of rock over millions of years. I don't think so. If a dam were built across Grand Canyon, a large lake would form. In fact, right after the flood of Noah's day, there used to be two huge lakes there, Grand Lake and Hopi Lake. The lakes are long gone, but the beaches are still there. You can still see the beach line. They got too full, went over the top, and washed out that canyon relatively quickly. That canyon is a washed out spillway. So no, it did not take millions of years for the Grand Canyon to form. It formed quickly, just after the flood.
That seems a whole lot more reasonable to me. If you've ever looked into a lot of the problems with evolution, you find that there's way more than you ever hear, certainly in the secular school system. You may not agree with everything you just heard right there, but if any of those are true, just like the analogy of the coins in the box, when did the ship sink, the youngest one, if it's definitive, if you can absolutely prove it, it sets the stage for the rest of the investigation. And as far as I'm concerned, that's a lot more believable, the story of origins and the tangible, observable, physical evidence that we can look at, than what we find in the, say, theoretical field of science, like what somebody like Neil deGrasse Tyson might have to say concerning our origins.
In the beginning, about 13.7 billion years ago, all the space and all the matter and all the energy of the known universe was contained in a volume less than 1/trillionth the size of the point of a pin. Conditions were so hot, the basic forces of nature that collectively described the universe were unified. For reasons unknown, this sub-pinpoint-sized cosmos began to expand. When the universe was a piping hot 10 to the 30th degrees and a youthful 10 to the minus 43 seconds old, before which all of our theories of matter and space break down and have no meaning. Black holes spontaneously formed, disappeared, and formed again out of the energy contained within the unified field. Under these extreme conditions, in what is admittedly speculative physics, the structure of space and time became severely curved as it gurgled into a spongy foam-like form. During this epoch, phenomena described by Einstein's general theory of relativity, the modern theory of gravity, and quantum mechanics, the description of matter in its smallest scales, were indistinguishable from one another. As the universe continued to expand and cool, gravity split from the other forces. Quickly thereafter, the strong nuclear force and the electroweak force split from each other, which was accompanied by an enormous release of stored energy that induced a rapid 30 power of 10 increase in the size of the universe. The rapid expansion of the universe, known as the Epoch of Inflation, stretched and smoothed out the cosmic distribution of matter and energy so that any regional variation in density became less than 1 part in 100,000. Continuing onward with what is now laboratory-confirmed physics, the universe was hot enough for photons to spontaneously convert their energy into matter-antimatter particle pairs, which immediately thereafter annihilated each other, returning their energy back to the photons. For reasons unknown, this symmetry between matter and antimatter had been broken, which led to a slight excess of matter over antimatter. For every billion antimatter particles, a billion plus 1 matter particles were born. This asymmetry was small, but really, really important for the future evolution of the universe. As the universe continued to cool, the electroweak force split into the electromagnetic force and the weak nuclear force, completing the 4 distinct and familiar forces of nature. While the energy of the photon bath continued to drop, pairs of matter-antimatter particles could no longer be created spontaneously from the available photons. All remaining pairs of matter-antimatter particles swiftly annihilated, leaving behind a universe with 1 particle of ordinary matter for every billion photons, and no antimatter. Had this matter over antimatter asymmetry not emerged, the expanding universe would forever be composed of light and nothing else, not even astrophysicists. Over a roughly 3-minute period, protons and neutrons assembled from the annihilations to become the simplest atomic nuclei. Meanwhile, free-roving electrons thoroughly scattered the photons to and fro, creating an opaque soup of matter and energy. When the universe cooled below a few thousand degrees Kelvin, about the temperature of fireplace embers, the loose electrons moved slowly enough to get snatched from the soup by the roving nuclei to make completed atoms of hydrogen, helium, and lithium, the three lightest elements. The universe is now, for the first time, transparent to visible light, and these free-flying photons are visible today as the cosmic microwave background. Over the first billion years, the universe continued to expand and cool as matter gravitated into these massive concentrations we call galaxies. Between 50 and 100 billion of them formed, each containing hundreds of billions of stars that undergo thermonuclear fusion in their cores. Those stars with more than about 10 times the mass of the Sun achieved sufficient pressure and temperature in their cores to manufacture dozens of elements heavier than hydrogen, including elements that compose the planets and the life upon them. These elements would be embarrassingly useless were they to remain locked inside the star. But high-mass stars fortuitously explode, scattering their chemically enriched guts throughout the galaxy. After 7 or 8 billion years of such enrichment, an undistinguished star was born in an undistinguished region of an undistinguished galaxy, in an undistinguished part of the universe, the outskirts of the Virgo supercluster. During the formation of this star system, matter condensed and accreted out of the parent cloud of gas while circling the Sun. The gas cloud from which the Sun formed contained a sufficient supply of heavy elements to form a system of planets, thousands of asteroids, and billions of comets. For several 100 million years, the persistent impacts of high-velocity comets and other leftover debris rendered molten the surfaces of the rocky planets, preventing the formation of complex molecules. As less and less accretable matter remained in the solar system, the planet's surfaces began to cool. The one we call Earth formed in a zone around the Sun where oceans remain largely liquid in form. Had Earth been much closer to the Sun, the oceans would have vaporized. Had Earth been much farther, the oceans would have frozen. In either case, life as we know it would not have evolved. Within the chemically rich liquid oceans, by a mechanism unknown, there emerged simple anaerobic bacteria that unwittingly transformed Earth's carbon dioxide-rich atmosphere into one with sufficient oxygen to allow aerobic organisms to emerge and dominate the oceans and land. These same oxygen atoms, normally found in pairs, O2, also combined in threes to form ozone, O3, in the upper atmosphere that protects Earth's surface from most of the Sun's molecule-hostile ultraviolet photons. The remarkable diversity of life on Earth, and we presume elsewhere in the universe, is owed to the cosmic abundance of carbon and the countless number of molecules, simple and complex, made from it. How can you argue when there are more varieties of carbon-based molecules than all other molecules combined? But life is fragile. Earth's encounters with large, leftover meteors, a formerly common event, wreak intermittent havoc upon the ecosystem. A mere 65 million years ago, less than 2% of Earth's past, a 10 trillion ton asteroid hit what is now the Yucatan Peninsula and obliterated over 70% of Earth's species of flora and fauna, including dinosaurs, the dominant land animals. This ecological tragedy pried open an opportunity for small surviving mammals to fill freshly vacant niches. One big-brained branch of these mammals, that which we call primates, evolved a genus and a species, Homo sapiens, to a level of intelligence that enabled them to invent methods and tools of science, to invent astrophysics, and to deduce the origin and evolution of the universe. Yes, the universe had a beginning. Yes, the universe continues to evolve. And yes, every one of our body's atoms is traceable to the Big Bang and to the thermonuclear furnace within high-mass stars. We are not simply in the universe, we are part of it. We are born from it. One might even say we've been empowered by the universe to figure itself out. And we've only just begun.
When science continues to put out fiction like this, I mean, who needs Hollywood? And we've only just begun to prove how completely absurd we can be with our theories. I saw a short video on our origins on YouTube earlier today, and it was dealing with, we've all heard we share something like 98 or 99% of our genome with chimpanzees, which is one of the big proofs that we supposedly evolved from apes and chimpanzees. Well, okay. Listen carefully to what they say as to how they arrived at the conclusion that we share that much in common with chimpanzees.
When researchers sat down to compare the chimp and human genomes, those single-letter differences were easy to tally, but the big mismatch sections weren't. For example, if a genetic paragraph, thousands of letters long, appears twice in a human scroll, but only once in its chimp counterpart, should that second human copy count as thousands of changes, or just one? And what about identical paragraphs that appear in both genomes, but in different places, or in reverse order, or broken up into pieces? Rather than monkey around with these difficult questions, the researchers simply excluded all the large mismatch sections, a whopping 1.3 billion letters in all, and performed a letter-by-letter comparison on the remaining 2.4 billion, which turned out to be 98.77% identical. So, yes, we share 99% of our DNA with chimps if we ignore 18% of their genome and 25% of ours.
Wow. I mean, this is absolute proof of how incredibly stupid science has become. I mean, did you hear what she said? When addressing the issue of our alleged link to chimpanzees, she said, the researchers simply excluded all the mismatched sections of DNA, a whopping 1.3 billion letters in all, and performed a letter-by-letter comparison of the remaining 2.4 billion, which turned out to be 98.77% identical. So yes, we share 99% of our DNA with chimps if we ignore 18% of tangible, observable, factual evidence from chimp DNA, and we ignore 25% of ours, which conflicts with it. Guys, that's outrageous. How we can continue to tolerate such absolute absurdity, it's beyond me. This is not science. All right, this is the natural result of the depravity that comes from ignoring the Word of God, and it's the byproduct of hating God.
You have written that God is a psychotic delinquent invented by mad, deluded people.
No, I didn't say quite that. I said something rather better than that.
Oh, well, please tell us what you said. Please tell us what you said.
Well, I would have to read it from the book.
No, please.
The God of the Old Testament is arguably the most unpleasant character in all fiction. Jealous and proud of it, a petty, unjust, unforgiving control freak, a vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully.
So that's what you think of God?
Yeah.
How about if people believed in a God of infinite lovingness and kindness and forgiveness and generosity, sort of like the modern day God? Why spoil it for them? Why not just let them have their fun and enjoy it?
I mean, I don't want to spoil anything for anybody. I write a book, people can read it if they want to. I believe that it is a liberating thing to free yourself from primitive superstition.
So religion is a primitive superstition?
I think it is, yes.
So you believe it's liberating to tell people that there is no God?
I think a lot of people, when they give up God, feel a great sense of release and freedom.
Well, then who did create the heavens and the earth?
Why do you use the word who? You see, you immediately beg the question by using the word who.
Well, then how did it get created?
Well, by a very slow process.
Well, how did it start?
Nobody knows how it started. We know the kind of event that it must have been. We know the sort of event that must have happened for the origin of life.
And what was that?
It was the origin of the first self-replicating molecule.
Right, and how did that happen?
I told you we don't know.
So you have no idea how it started?
No, nor has anybody.
Nor has anyone else.
Evolution is a fact. It's documented by science.
Right, and how did that happen?
I told you we don't know.
Believe these things because they're facts proved by evidence. Evolution is also a demonstrated fact. The truth really is out there. It's not a matter of opinion.
So you have no idea how it started?
No, nor has anybody.
Nor has anyone else. What do you think is the possibility that intelligent design might turn out to be the answer to some issues in genetics or in evolution?
It could come about in the following way. It could be that at some earlier time, somewhere in the universe, a civilization evolved by probably some kind of Darwinian means, to a very, very high level of technology and designed a form of life that they seeded onto perhaps this planet. Now, that is a possibility and an intriguing possibility. And I suppose it's possible that you might find evidence for that if you look at the details of biochemistry, molecular biology. You might find a signature of some sort of designer.
Wait a second. Richard Dawkins thought intelligent design might be a legitimate pursuit?
And that designer could well be a higher intelligence from elsewhere in the universe. But that higher intelligence would itself have had to have come about by some explicable or ultimately explicable process. It couldn't have just jumped into existence spontaneously. That's the point.
So Professor Dawkins was not against intelligent design, just certain types of designers, such as God.
Of course, and this is where Ancient Aliens enters the picture. Coming from an academic like Richard Dawkins. He's like the main spokesperson for evolution these days. Which means if that's the main view of evolution, that's what's making it into the textbooks. And of course, that's what we are being indoctrinated with on a regular basis on primetime television. You know, Ancient Aliens is just one of many shows out there putting forth that idea. I'm reading a book I've mentioned in previous broadcasts, 3 books actually, but if I was to recommend one, all 3 of them are good. The Zetetic Astronomy by Dr. Samuel Robotham, 100 Proofs Earth Not a Globe by William Carpenter, and Terra Firma, The Earth Not a Planet, Proved from Scripture, Reason, and Fact. If I was to say, if you asked me which one was the best of the 3, or you know, which one would I recommend if you could only get one, I would say get Terra Firma. This book is awesome. And I'm going to quote something from chapter 7, section 1. He said, "It is truly painful to contemplate the results of modern astronomy, its rejection of the Word of God with respect to the revolution of the sun and its consequent tendency towards infidelity, its abandonment of reason, and its denial of the proper use of our senses as to the observation of actual facts, its brazen effrontery in teaching without proof the most ridiculous fallacies. Fill the minds of the thoughtful and devout with real sorrow, knowing that so many have been already beguiled, and so many are still being beguiled under its baneful influence." Man, that's exactly what's happening. You know, this is what was going on in 1901, and it's only gotten worse since then. This author continues, "Herschel, perhaps, in one sense, as much as Newton himself, tried to make fools of us when he wrote the following tidbit, quote, 'In the order of our senses we transfer in idea the motion of the earth to the sun, and the stillness of the sun to the earth,' end quote. Which statement virtually means, do not believe your own senses, but take our theories for granted. If you do not feel any motion in the earth, imagine that you do. And if you see the sun circling in the heavens, suppose that it is the earth which does so." Truly, it was his own senses which were disordered when he taught that it is the earth and not the sun that moves. The absurdities of modern astronomy are nowhere more apparent than in theories respecting the sun. And let me just say, at this point, while I haven't committed to fully embracing the flat enclosed earth thesis, although I do admit that that's what the Bible clearly says. I mean, it says what it says, and there's no way around it. So I'm kind of in the, okay, I believe, but help my unbelief mode right now. But that said, as I've continued to dig, one of the subjects that keeps coming up is the idea of heliocentricity versus geocentricity. And this much I am prepared to say. With all the stuff I've been looking into, I'm becoming more and more and more convinced. In fact, I might even well just say I do now believe in geocentricity. There's actually a movie coming out, or I think it's already come out, called The Principle. And I'm going to play some clips from the trailer and some other interviews with the filmmakers. Check this out.
Everything we think we know about our universe is wrong.
There is a crisis in cosmology. This is the moment of truth.
All these things are rather strange, and we don't know why they're occurring right now.
We are in a special place. I do believe that the universe was created by God.
It's an exciting time for cosmology because everything has changed.
If our Earth really turns out to be special, then I would say God made a mistake.
The universe is going to eventually run out of energy and all life will die. The future looks very bleak.
It's a strange time in cosmology because we don't understand nothing. Whole universes could come from nothing.
Whoa, what is going on here?
As it turns out, nothing is almost everything.
Dark energy, as we call it, is the greatest mystery in all of creation.
Science has said you must stay over in this category here and you cannot go into the God category because that's going to destroy our science.
We have to ask Mother Nature, how do you work? There's a shelf full of Nobel Prizes for the physicists who can unlock the secrets of dark matter.
You can go on some websites of NASA and see that they've started to take down stuff that might hint to a geocentric universe.
We may be very special, but that doesn't mean the universe was created just for us.
This idea that we're not in any special place in the universe, there's something wrong with that.
So they send up this satellite and they find out these temperature disturbances throughout the universe were all pointing to the Earth.
When I see how barren the other planets are and how bountiful the Earth is, something's different, and we're in just the right spot.
We seem to find ourselves in a part of the universe that is perfectly tuned for life.
Life is extremely rare, and that we are in fact the only life in our entire universe. Now I actually think we're very significant.
The Earth is a very special place, no two ways about it.
A new documentary is so controversial, scientists and even people in the movie are condemning it before they've had the chance to even see it. Paul Strand talked to the even more controversial executive producer to find out why the film is causing such outrage and why, if people see it and believe it, it'll have the effect of literally putting Earth back at the center of the universe.
The principle goes to the very edges of the vast universe and to the latest science to present what its makers believe is solid evidence the whole universe is aligned with and circling around Earth and its Milky Way galaxy.
As if the galaxies preferred to lie at some periodic spacing out from the Earth. This is sort of like saying that our galaxy is somewhere near the center of the universe, and when you look at the galaxies arrayed all around us, they're on sort of like giant shells.
If you're a believer in the Big Bang, you believe that there's going to be this smooth explosion that's not going to have any distinguishing features, and it's not going to have any center. So if you find a center in that big mass, well, that means somebody had to make it that way. There's a designer behind it.
Earth at the center of the cosmos was accepted dogma till Copernicus in the 1500s suggested everything isn't moving around Earth. On that Copernican principle, most of the modern science has formed that says Earth is just one more meaningless moving orb among trillions in a purposeless, unplanned universe. By questioning that Copernican principle, this new documentary is outraging some scientists, even some who are in the film, like physicist Lawrence Krauss. In the online magazine Slate, he's written, "The best thing we can all do when faced by nonsense like that, or equivalent silliness promoted by biblical fundamentalists, who claim that science supports a literal interpretation of the Bible, is to ignore it in public forums and not shine any light on the authors of this trash." But scientists in the film admit their own theories about how the universe works don't come close to fitting with the latest data.
However, in cosmology, we're off by a factor of 10 to the 120. That is 1 with 120 zeros after it. This is the largest mismatch between theory and experiment in the history of science.
In the principle, Krauss describes a radiation permeating the whole universe.
The cosmic microwave background is the afterglow of the Big Bang.
The only source of radiation we've ever discovered that comes to us from all directions of the sky.
The principle's executive producer says 3 recent probes of this show the same proof that the universe and its galaxies are arrayed around Earth and the Milky Way.
If all of the radiation, which comes from everywhere in the universe, there's no place we don't see it, and it's all coming toward us and aligned with us like this, you know, on a 23.5 degree tilt and with our equator, the Earth is like a little pea compared to like the Milky Way. You know, what is this universe doing being aligned with this little pea? But that's what they found 3 times in 20 years.
On the same day Krauss announced the film, so did its narrator, Kate Mulgrew, the famed Captain Janeway of Star Trek Voyager. She said on her Facebook fan page, "I was a voice for hire, and a misinformed one at that." But in this promo material for The Principal, Mulgrew spoke of totally getting its content before she did her narration.
I have to fully understand it. I have to separate it out. Do you know, it has to make perfect sense to me.
As the film prepares for its first public showing this weekend, Bob Sungenis has also had to beat back accusations by physicist Krauss and others that he's an anti-Semite and Holocaust denier.
It's been blown up so out of proportion. As a matter of fact, I had to make a statement, a public statement, and I made it two separate statements. I believe in the Holocaust, you know, I love the Jewish people, I'm not an anti-Semite, all this stuff.
His supporters say Sungenis is the victim of made-up stories and half-truths. The Principal's creators suspect the attacks were a coordinated campaign to keep people from concentrating on the evidence in the film that there is provable design in the universe and Earth's at the center of it, like what scientists found with the 2005 Sloan Digital Sky Survey of all the visible cosmos.
As far out as we could see in the universe, the galaxies were aligned in concentric spheres around, guess what? Earth, or our galaxy.
The film's makers are first testing to see if The Principal might make it as a theatrical release before they'll put it on DVD and online. Paul Strand, CBN News.
Now, let's switch gears a little bit here and take on a topic that is sure to be very controversial with many of you. In school, we are all taught the heliocentric model of our solar system. The heliocentric model is the one that we are all familiar with, where the Sun is in the center of our solar system and all of the planets orbit around it. However, what you probably did not know is that mathematically speaking, the geocentric model is every bit as viable.
So is everything we know wrong?
Well, if the Copernican principle is wrong, then yes. Because as Bob said, everything is interpreted through that epistemological grid. And if that foundational assumption is wrong, then yes, our picture of the universe is fundamentally wrong. Now, the scientists will argue back and forth about this. They are very invested in a very successful model. But that model has a lot of patches in it. Dark matter, dark energy, you know, these things have not been observationally confirmed. They believe they must be there because their formulas have gotten them so far, and so they'll plug in these other entities to make the equations work. But there is a strong and growing, very credible group of scientists who are beginning to question the Copernican principle. For example, we all learned about dark energy. Dark energy is causing the universe to accelerate its expansion. Well, George Ellis and a group that he works with, that we talk about in the film with, they said, wait a minute, let's just play with this for a second. Let's look at the world through a different view. Let's put Earth near the center, and let's get rid of the Copernican principle. Can we explain everything we see without dark energy? And the answer is yes, you can. And you will see many papers now in the peer-reviewed journals. They call it void cosmology. And the idea is that we're at the center of a void, and if we assume that the Earth is in that special non-Copernican position, we don't need dark energy to explain these observations, and that's big. That's big, because nobody has a clue what dark energy is.
Well, that's one of the things, Bob, isn't it? That it seems to me that, okay, so there's a big riddle here that, at least from the purely scientific point of view, there's this big riddle, and the riddle is, you know, how does the universe work? Okay, at some point, you know, you throw out a guess about some aspect of it, and then to support that guess, you have to come up with 3 more guesses, and to support those 3, they each spin off 10 more. Well, at what point do you get called on the fact, hey guys, every time you come up with one of these further guesses, you're further removed from anything observable. Yeah. But, you know, it makes it on the cover of Time magazine, and the average Joe goes, ooh, dark matter. I have the slightest idea what that means. The guys hypothesizing it barely know what it means. So what does that say of the way I think everybody there's so many people in modern culture walk around with this like, ooh, science, wafting the incense at the altar of, and And I mean, your point earlier, yeah, we know how a cell phone works, and that's cool. But this stuff is so much theory and hypothesis, and there's nothing to back it up. It's really kind of unscientific science.
Has there ever been an experiment done to prove that the Earth is revolving around the sun?
Yes, there was several experiments in the 1800s. Dominique Arago, Armand Fuseau, Augustin Fresnel, but one of the most famous was the Michelson-Morley experiment in 1887.
Let's assume the ether frame moves relative to the Earth from left to right. Michelson-Morley used a half-silvered mirror to split a beam of light so that it travels in two different directions along two paths of equal length. This is the light beam before it is split. Moving in a perpendicular direction to the ether frame, this beam would be blown off course and would have to travel a little further. Traveling back down this path again, perpendicular to the ether, would also move this beam off course, if the ether existed. This beam, moving parallel to the ether and in the same direction, would increase its speed. This beam, again parallel to the ether, but moving in the opposite direction, would be slowed down. Here the two light beams are recombined together, and if they are in phase, they will constructively interfere. But if the speed was different in the two paths, they would combine to give an interference pattern.
No. Tell us about that.
Well, they used light beams to measure whether the Earth was moving, and they found that there was no movement. The Earth has to be moving 30 kilometers per second to complete its annual revolution. And they found out that it wasn't moving in a very precise. Michelson could have calculated it to 1/100th of what he got in his experiment. That's how sensitive his instruments were.
What did the experiment involve in terms of apparatus, so we can get a concrete understanding of
well,
what they
if
found?
if the Earth is moving around the sun, and we shoot that light beam in the direction that the Earth is moving, okay, and then we shoot another light beam perpendicular to that, well, the one that's in the direction of the Earth's movement should be impeded in some way if it's moving through space, whereas this one that's going perpendicular would not be impeded.
Why not?
Because it's not going through space. It's just going north and south.
Okay.
Okay? And what they found, they expected to have a 30-kilometer difference between these two light beams. There was no difference. So the natural interpretation, and even Einstein admits this, Mach admits this, Born admits this, the natural interpretation is that the Earth isn't moving. So how do we get out of that? Well, you invent special relativity. And now you say, well, the reason that light beam wasn't affected when it went toward the motion of the Earth was because the apparatus shortened.
Huh?
Yeah, Michelson's apparatus shortened as it was going with the Earth in its orbit around the sun.
No, wait, you're telling me that the contraction of mass was invented to explain away the results of the Michelson-Morley experiment?
Yes, and that's what my book will tell you, and it's been admitted by all the scientists.
Well, isn't there any experimental confirmation that as you approach the speed of light, there's a contraction effect? The impression is that there's all kinds of experimental confirmation.
That was invented. There's no proof to it.
Really?
Yes, all the physicists will tell you there's no proof
Not
to
that
it.
I'm surprised, you understand.
Yeah.
I know what the scientific community is capable of in terms of mass deception. Evolution is a mass deception. But I wasn't aware that they don't really have any even purported scientific confirmation in terms of physical measurement.
No, nobody
of the contraction effect.
Nobody measured a contraction. But they put it into a mathematical formula called the Lorentz transform, and it's probably the most famous equation used in physics today.
Does anyone expressly admit that, hey, we had to come up with this contraction effect because otherwise we're stuck with a motionless
Yes,
Earth?
the very guy who invented it.
Tell me what he
Lorentz.
admitted.
Heinrich Lorentz says, I don't have any other explanation to this experiment of Michelson-Morley unless I contract the apparatus. Otherwise, we're going to have to believe the Earth is standing still in space.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Can you give an approximate page reference for me to your book? I want to go back and read that right away.
I'll send you an email. I'll show you where it is.
Here's another objection. If everything is moving, in other words, all the stars in the universe are moving, how could we possibly determine if we are the center of this moving universe?
Over the past decade or so, we have seen out to the very limits of the observable cosmos. We've mapped its largest structure, the cosmic microwave background, the oldest light in the universe according to the standard Big Bang model of cosmology. what we have discovered is shocking.
On the very largest scales, we see a pattern of really big hot and cold spots which line up around a special axis, which has been dubbed the axis of evil. And it's quite puzzling. Why is there a special direction in space?
Well, you know, it's interesting that you asked that, because in 2009 they set up a probe called the Planck probe. It just came back with the results in 2013 in March. I don't know if you heard about it or not.
No.
The European Space Agency set it up in cooperation with NASA. This was the third attempt that they had to nullify the data that they were finding in the cosmic microwave background radiation that permeates the whole universe, that the Earth was in the center of the universe. The first one they set up was in 1990 called the COBE probe. It came back, showed the Earth was in the center. The WMAP was the second one in 2001, came back with the same data. And what they tried to do was say that this was all an error. It was some kind of misreading, or it was, there was contamination in the apparatus or the sky or whatever. So they sent up a third probe in 2009, just came back in 2013. Guess what? Same exact results. Same exact results. And what were the interpretations? Well, the Earth has to be in the center of the universe. And we have somebody quoted in our book, Lawrence Krauss of the Arizona State University, who says, yeah, this means we're in the center of the universe.
Let's pick up on that point a bit. You mentioned that the background radiation, microwave radiation in the universe, supplied data from which it became apparent that the Earth was in fact at the center of a moving universe. Explain why that is so. Why do these data confirm that?
Okay. Well, the Big Bang Theory predicts that there was an explosion 13.7 billion years ago. Okay? So if there was an explosion, then that means the explosion had to come out equal on all sides of the sphere. It had to be what they call homogeneous. Okay? And that's naturally accepted. It's like homogenized milk.
Sure.
You know, you shake that thing up and you can't see one place from another place. It's all homogenized. And that's what they needed for this Big Bang universe. What they found when they sent these three probes up, yeah, some of it was homogeneous, but it's like having a bowl full of Jell-O with two swords going through the middle of the Jell-O.
What are the swords?
The swords are the orientation of the cosmic microwave background radiation throughout the universe.
What do you mean by the orientation?
Okay, there's hot and cold spots they found. It's not homogeneous. There's hot and cold spots in this microwave background radiation, and if you align all these cold spots, it forms an X through the whole universe.
Unbelievable.
And guess what's in the middle?
Oh, you're kidding.
No.
This is what the data shows.
This is what the data shows.
Okay, come on now. What mainstream publication recognizes
The
this?
University of Michigan, Dragon Hutterer, Craig Copey, Glenn Starkman. These are all the guys who have done all the work on this microwave radiation. They write it in their papers. They wrote one in 2004, 2008, 2010, and 2012, and they're writing another one on the Planck probe.
So you're saying these space probes were designed to explain away the X represented by the hot and cold spots?
They wanted to make sure it wasn't an accident.
Okay, so there were how many probes in total?
3 in 20 years.
And you're saying that all 3 confirmed what then?
That the Earth is in the center of the universe.
On the basis of the hot and cold spots?
Yes.
Whose alignment represents an X.
An X.
And at the center of the X is the Earth.
Right, and they call that X the axis of evil. That was coined.
The scientists called that the axis of evil.
Called it the axis of evil. That was coined in 2004 when Bush went into Iraq. Remember, he called them the axis of evil? So this cosmologist just picked it up and said, yeah, well, here's the axis of evil right here in the universe.
So, in other words, they're enraged by the finding.
Oh, yeah.
Because it upsets their worldview, which has to displace the Earth's special position in the universe.
Yeah.
Which fits in rather nicely with a divinely created universe.
Right.
Made for man.
All of cosmology is based on what we call the Copernican principle. Every piece of data that they get in their telescope has to be filtered through the Copernican principle. And that's what the Big Bang Theory does, NASA does it, ESA does it, everybody does it. The upsetting thing about this microwave radiation is it just totally defies the Copernican principle.
The last probe confirmed that as well, you say?
The last probe, yeah. As a matter of fact,
where was that result reported? Obviously everywhere, but give me some examples.
March 21st in the European Space Agency report. As a matter of fact, it's in our movie.
What's their attempt to explain the latest probe's findings away?
Anomalies.
Anomalies?
Mm-hmm.
And all the anomalies conveniently line up in a non-anomalous way to verify their model.
Right.
This is amazing. So this brings us to the question of motive. We've been hinting at it throughout the discussion, there's obviously a motive at work here. Many people have recognized, not just believers, not just Catholics, but people like David Berlinski, for example, that science has become an ideology. Maybe you could take up that theme as we close out this interview.
Yeah.
Isn't there an ideological component?
Yeah, I would even go so far as to say it's a religion. Science is a religion today. It's scientism. And they've already got the parameters within which they want to interpret the data. And they're not going to go outside those parameters. This is a perfect example. You do get some of them that break out of it, and they say, yeah, well, this defies the Copernican principle. We've read many papers like that, and we quote them in our book. Okay? But the motivation is, if the Copernican principle is wrong, that means all of science is wrong. Everything, cosmogony, paleontology, cosmology, archaeology, everything now becomes suspect because we can't support these long ages. We can't support this vast universe. As a matter of fact, we're in the center of it. How does that happen? Well, it's not going to happen by chance. Someone had to put it there, you see, and that's what they're scared of. That's the motivation.
Let's say we just use modern science, just for the sake of argument. Let's say we used Einstein's general relativity, invented in 1915. Well, Einstein's general relativity said there's no difference between an Earth fixed in the universe and the universe going around it, as opposed to the universe remaining fixed and the Earth rotating. Those two are equivalent. Why? Because everything's relative in general relativity, you see. So modern science can't refute the idea. It was Einstein, Mach, Born. I mean, you go down all the prominent scientists of the day, they all agreed, yeah, there's no way we can refute that. The universe can go around the Earth. Or the Earth can rotate inside a fixed universe. Which one is true, they can't tell us. You see, that's the key point here. They can't tell us. Science can only go so far.
Right.
And then you have revelation, you see.
Yes.
And revelation fills the gap.
Absolutely.
Okay?
You know, it's interesting when you think about, okay, you know, if we are, I'll borrow the prop myself. So here we are, assuming in the studio that the studio is the universe. We're on here looking out. And how do we know? I mean, if this is moving versus that's moving.
Very good point.
Yeah.
This is the key.
You're the fish in the aquarium. So how can you be in the aquarium and make an observation from outside the aquarium? You're in it.
What a brilliant observation, Michael. And you put your finger on it. Because one of the interesting things about this film is that 500 years ago, you were crazy if you thought the Earth was rotating on its axis. Yeah. 500 years later, you're crazy if you think it isn't. Yeah. I guarantee you the universe hasn't changed, right? So what has changed is our view. Yeah. In other words, oh, you're crazy to think, no, I'm afraid that's not going to work. Because physics itself had to reinvent itself at the beginning of the 20th century by Albert Einstein, because they couldn't measure that assumed motion of the Earth around the sun. One of the more interesting parts of our film is that experiment, that 1887 Michelson-Morley experiment, where they could not measure what they were sure was happening. So you have two doors. You have door number one. Well, maybe it ain't moving around the sun. Can't have that.
Right.
Door number two is we get to reinvent physics from the ground up.
Again.
And we have to say, yes, we have to say, no experiment can detect absolute motion. All physics can do is describe relative motion. And Einstein even says, it's a quote in our book, it is equally valid under relativity to talk about the Earth motionless at the center and the universe rotating around it, or the Earth rotating on its axis and the universe being steady.
So, we are, in fact, at the center of the universe. Well, no big surprise. That's actually what the scriptures have to say. It says that we are here and everything is for our benefit. Neil deGrasse Tyson and others would say that we are completely insignificant, but apparently that's not what real science is revealing to be true. Okay, so if we are on a stationary planet, whether we're talking globe or flat, that would seem to throw most of what we've all been taught out the window. If we're not spinning and if we're not orbiting, I mean, most of what we have been taught in school and on movies and TV shows and documentaries is false. Copernicus, Galileo, they were wrong. In fact, I think there's a website out there called Galileo Was Wrong, and another, if I'm not mistaken, another documentary as well. So where does that leave us? I mean, are we looking at a conspiracy here or what? Well, this whole flat Earth controversy seems to be intimately connected to climate chaos, climate change. Remember that French ambassador dude, whatever, said there's 500 more days until climate chaos?
We have 500 days to avoid the climate chaos. Very important issue of climate change, climate chaos, and I said that we had 500 days to avoid the climate chaos, and I know that President Obama and John Kerry himself are committed on this subject, and I'm sure that with them, with a lot of other friends, we shall be able to reach a success in this very important matter.
Let's talk about the French foreign minister. The French foreign minister has started the countdown Tuesday to the climate change disaster. He was with John Kerry, and John Kerry. These two are meeting about important things, like the world is melting down economically, the world is melting down socially, the world is melting down, and countries are in chaos, but they are addressing the big issues. And speaking in English, Fabius, the French foreign minister, Laurent Fabius, said, we're really worried about Iran and Syria and the Ukraine, but the very important issue, the issue of climate change and climate chaos.
Climate chaos. So it's been global warming, climate change, climate disruption, now climate chaos.
Hold on just a second. Chrissy, I'm only doing this. I'm only putting up with these flat earthers. We each got to do what we got to do. Today, later today, or tomorrow, you're going to have to come out with a statement about how much you hate me. I just want you to know right now, I just have to pretend that climate chaos isn't real.
He said, that is a funny statement. I have to pretend climate chaos isn't real.
Well, you laugh, but your days are numbered, mister.
They are. Down to 499 quote, now.
He said, quote, we have 500 days to avoid climate chaos.
And this was yesterday, so it's 499.
I'm sure the president and John Kerry himself are committed on this subject, and I'm sure that with them, a lot of other friends, we shall be able to reach success on this very important matter. We have 499 days. I want a countdown clock on the show. Every day, I want to be able to 499 days to climate chaos. I think, and I mean this sincerely, at least I doubt the Blaze would, be for this, but I think we should. But we can put this up on glennbeck.com. I want a countdown clock to climate chaos.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's fair. Mm-hmm. It's only fair to know when the chaos is going to arrive.
And I want you to know that there is nobody out there at all on the left. They're not doing, Colbert's not doing a thing about the doom room with the French foreign minister and John Kerry.
Oh, no.
They're not going out and saying they're fear mongers, that they're just trying to, gain wealth or
I mean, think of the comments that we've made. I mean, because this is what they used to do to you. They used to say, oh, he's apocalyptic. He's talking about the end of the world. He's doom and gloom. When these guys can come out and literally say all of civilization is at immediate risk
within 499 days.
Well, that's just this guy. I would say Al Gore was saying the other day it's already here. So, I mean, I don't know where this guy gets this optimistic timeline of 500 days. I would say this guy's a flat earther compared to what Al Gore was saying the other day.
Yeah.
He was saying it's already here, it's already happening.
You just keep saying it enough, and people will believe it. You just keep saying it enough with people saying, that people just don't stand up anymore. People don't push back anymore. People honestly don't mock them. We should have the countdown to chaos, climate chaos, 500 days, 499 now.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody should have one of those in their office. You should make one in your office. You should mock them just as they mock you. Mock them.
I'd also like to
because if you don't make it into a joke, it becomes real. If you don't make it into a joke in your own home with your own kids, it will become real. They're going to school and they are hearing this nonsense. Climate chaos. Climate chaos? What are you talking about?
Good question, Glenn Beck. I think we need to be asking, what the heck's going on here? And why is it intimately connected? Climate change, of course, is being pushed on us by NASA. And NASA's the only one giving us any real alleged proof that we're on a globe. And everybody, including the president, is linking flat Earth to this subject.
We've got to move beyond partisan politics on this issue. I want to be clear. I am willing to work with anybody. Republicans, Democrats, Independents, Libertarians, Greens, anybody to combat this threat on behalf of our kids. I'm open to all sorts of new ideas, maybe better ideas, to make sure that we deal with climate change in a way that promotes jobs and growth. Nobody has a monopoly on what is a very hard problem, but I don't have much patience for anyone who denies that this challenge is real. We don't have time for a meeting of the Flat Earth Society. Sticking your head in the sand might make you feel safer, but it's not going to protect you from the coming storm. And ultimately, we will be judged as a people and as a society and as a country on where we go from here. Our founders believed that those of us in positions of power are elected not just to serve as custodians of the present, but as caretakers of the future. And they charged us to make decisions with an eye on a longer horizon than the arc of our own political careers. That's what the American people expect. That's what they deserve. And someday our children and our children's children will look at us in the eye and they'll ask us, did we do all that we could when we had the chance to deal with this problem and leave them a cleaner, safer, more stable world? And I want to be able to say, yes, we did. Don't you want that? Americans are not a people who look backwards. We're a people who look forward. We're not a people who fear what the future holds. We shape it. What we need in this fight are citizens who will stand up and speak up and compel us to do what this moment demands. Understand, this is not just a job for politicians. So I'm going to need all of you to educate your classmates, your colleagues, your parents, your friends. Tell them what's at stake. Speak up at town halls, church groups, PTA meetings. Push back on misinformation. Speak up for the facts. Broaden the circle of those who are willing to stand up for our future. Convince those in power to reduce our carbon pollution. Push your own communities to adopt smarter practices. Invest, divest. Remind folks there's no contradiction between a sound environment and strong economic growth. And remind everyone who represents you at every level of government that sheltering future generations against the ravages of climate change is a prerequisite for your vote. Make yourself heard on this issue. I understand the politics will be tough. The challenge we must accept will not reward us with a clear moment of victory. There's no gathering army to defeat. There's no peace treaty to sign. When President Kennedy said we'd go to the moon within the decade, we knew we'd build a spaceship and we'd meet the goal. Our progress here will be measured differently. In crises averted, in a planet preserved. But can we imagine a more worthy goal? For while we may not live to see the full realization of our ambition, we will have the satisfaction of knowing that the world we leave to our children will be better off for what we did. It makes you realize, that astronaut said all those years ago, just what you have back there on Earth. And that image in the photograph, that bright blue ball rising over the moon's surface, containing everything we hold dear, the laughter of children, a quiet sunset, all the hopes and dreams of posterity, that's what's at stake. That's what we're fighting for. And if we remember that, I'm absolutely sure we'll succeed. So thank you. God bless you. God bless the United States of America.
I mean, there are a lot of different idioms that we can use to call somebody stupid, a moron, or an idiot, right? So why is it have to be connected with flat Earth? And it comes up over and over and over again. And of course, Bill Nye's also out there pushing this big climate change, climate chaos issue.
First of all, we discourage the use of the term skeptic. When people say I'm a climate skeptic, no, you are a climate denier. You're a climate change denier.
Right.
And that's really important. And people say, well, what can we do about this? What can we do about this? Right now I'm saying talk about climate change. If you just raise the awareness of climate change. Have you heard this expression, millennial anger? Do you have this? Where the millennials are like, you guys have been in charge. You heard about climate change in 1988. James Hansen testified in front of Congress. And you haven't done about it. What's wrong with you people our age? People are going to have to leave Florida, leave Louisiana, the Gulf Coast. People are going to have to leave. And this is the developed world. And this is going to be everybody's problem. So the sooner we get to work, the better.
Well, and part of the problem with all this, even if you look at the polling, there was a recent New York Times Stanford University poll that found that actually half of Republicans believe that climate change is happening.
There you go.
But if you look at the general polling, it's not a top issue for Democrats or Republicans.
It's not an issue for the same feces throwers and flat earthers who you're talking about who vote in the primary. That's the problem. Is that steep? They have to get over that.
They're going to shoot it down.
But you're also hearing...
Actually, there is a plan to pump sulfur dioxide into the air and reflect sunlight into space. Are you high?
Right.
You can't engineer a planet like that.
I'm so glad you asked me that question. 37% think global warming is a hoax. Of course, that's 58% of Republicans. 28% of Republicans still think Saddam Hussein was behind 9/11. I mean, even the Republicans are not playing that card anymore.
The most important poll is the climate change one, because you know what? There was on like the JFK assassination, there was polling on that. There was the Bigfoot, there's the lizard men. But, you know, that doesn't affect policy. If you believe in lizard men controlling the government, you're not going to actually be involved in policy. But 37% of Americans who think that climate change is not real, that's scary.
There are huge numbers of people who think that, look, 30 years ago, people thought that a lot of the scientists thought that the planet was cooling, not warming. So all of a sudden now the science is completely reversed.
But if you that's a canard, Steve.
Bill, it is a canard to say that there is a total scientific consensus on global warming. There is not. There is not. That is not true. There are some scientists who believe in global warming and others who don't.
Right, who work for Exxon. Right, it is absurd. It's always been absurd. There are scientists on the other side.
You can't just win the debate by saying that.
No, they're backed by the American Petroleum Institute and Professor Irwin Corey. Those are the people, scientists on the other side of the debate.
For hundreds of millions of years, the climate of the Earth has been changing. You know that.
But not at the level and the degree that it is changing right now. What scientists are telling...
Have the humility to... I don't understand.
Look, I'm the one who's having humility. I'm saying we should have a debate here. You guys are saying that the debate is
How about we just listen to scientists?
That's what I'm saying. Listen to scientists. Have the humility to believe people who know things you don't.
It's like people like you guys who are saying, no, we can't have a debate on this.
The debate is over. At some point, the debate has to be...
You're the one should have some humility. Say, wait a minute, there are a lot of people who disagree.
Should we still debate whether the Earth is flat?
We're trying to move towards the future. They want to be stuck in the past. And we've heard this kind of thinking before. Let me tell you something. If some of these folks were around when Columbus set sail, they must have been founding members of the Flat Earth Society. They would not have believed that the world was round.
Is the world round? Is the world flat? You know, I'm still searching it out. But when you look at the names of various projects like Project Paperclip starting NASA, Project high jump going to Antarctica, Project Deep Freeze, and all of a sudden, after Deep Freeze, they start launching up high-altitude nuclear bombs into the air and calling it fishbowl. And then, of course, we have the Illuminati playing cards, also announcing that the Flat Earthers are onto something. So, I don't know, guys. Anyway, just something to think about. That's all the time we have left for tonight. Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll see you back next week on the Revolutionary Radio Project. Good night, everybody.